right, well, thank you very much for having me. All these cameras, I kind of feel like Kim Kardashian here. Smarter in my comments, however. Let me just lay it on the table here. I'm going to be a critic of public subsidies for stadiums. I'll kind of lay out the case why I think this is the issue. Part of being a critic, however, doesn't mean I'm a critic of baseball. I'm very excited to actually go see the game here. Big baseball fan, big sports fan. As a matter of fact, I used to even, I was a referee for Major League Soccer, actually, which actually makes that nice because I've had 35,000 people chanting at me, "I'm blind, I'm deaf, I want to be a ref," so this, I don't think this will be too hostile a crowd in the big picture here. Okay, so, in any case, so let's go on here. So minor league baseball and local economic development, let's take a look at what we got. Obviously, this is the story we're talking about here. This is at least one of the renditions of the proposed stadium here in downtown Providence. But the real question is that a good use of taxpayer money? Let me say right up front, I think this would be a fantastic stadium. Sorry, Pawtucket, but this would be a fantastic stadium for the owners to spend their own money on, and I would be 100% in favor of any city who wants to encourage these teams to come and spend their own money, providing facilities. The question is, when it comes down to spending other people's money on it, is that a good use of taxpayer money? Well, commercial sports heavily subsidized in the U.S. The last place I was in was Minnesota, so we got a couple Minnesotan quotes here. This is Hubert H. Humphrey, that the Metrodome was named after in Minneapolis. Without professional sports, the Twin Cities are just a cold Omaha. I have a lot of friends in Minnesota who were saying, "How much snow exactly do you have in Worcester right now?" So that's Hubert Humphrey. Stadiums should be like libraries. If the taxpayers pay for it, they should get to use it for free. That's notable Governor Jesse the Body Ventura. One of my favorite movies when I was a kid was Predator. I had no idea when I was a kid that I was watching two future governors acting in that movie. Who would have thought? And this should be the People's Stadium. That's current Governor Mark Dayton. In fact, it is the People's Stadium because the people are spending about $500 million on the new Viking Stadium. So minor league stadium, boom. So let's focus particularly on the minor leagues here. So some of the, not quite as much information on minor league stadiums as the major leagues. Hasn't been as much economics research on this. But between 1992 and 2006 is the best study on that. About half of minor league teams in the country got new stadiums, including 7 out of the 14 teams in the International League. Of course, that's the league the Paw Sox play in here. Stadium boom has continued. At least 8 new stadiums in AAA alone since that study about 10 years ago. So that's continued, including several nice ones again in the International League. McCoy Stadium, oldest stadium in either AA or AAA ball, opened, I guess, in 1942. And it's one of only 3 stadiums in all of AA or AAA minor league baseball that was opened before 1980 even. So this is definitely an old historic stadium. Only 2 older stadiums in kind of big-time baseball, and that's Fenway and Wrigley. Mind you, though, I would say that's venerable Fenway and venerable Wrigley Field. Both of those places extremely popular destinations. So it's not just that old is bad. In fact, if you look at attendance numbers compared to like records and things like this, like should you actually want to go to these games? You have a weird sense that the newer the stadium, the higher the attendance, or the older the stadium, the higher the attendance. And so you get great fans at both of those old historic ballparks. McCoy Stadium kind of in that same sort of category. Taxpayer financing. Major League Baseball, 26 out of 30 stadiums have been built in Major League Baseball since 1990. $5.5 billion of taxpayer money on that. That covers roughly 60% of all stadium costs. Again, been publicly financed. Major League Baseball is pretty much like the other sports. NFL has had about 2/3 of its stadiums covered by public money. Hockey and basketball arenas, roughly 50%-ish. Major League Soccer, roughly 50% as well. As of 2006, an estimated 85% of construction costs for minor league parks during that time period I'm talking about were covered by taxpayers, again, through, I think that should be actually through 2006. So roughly 1992 to 2006, 85% of construction costs covered by the public. So we'll get back to this idea again. In some ways, the amount of money being asked for the Providence Stadium is not out of line with what other people have received over the past couple decades. I'll make the argument that it's way out of line compared to what we should expect, but certainly not out of line compared to what we actually have seen. McCoy Stadium, of course, has been the beneficiary of public subsidy. A public investment in the stadium when it opened in 1942. When McCoy Stadium opened in 1942, that at $1.5 million, it was apparently a massive construction debacle in some ways. At $1.5 million, it was the most expensive stadium in the United States. That's just such a shock. $1.5 million was the most expensive stadium. We now have the whole raft of billion-dollar stadiums in the United States now, but quaint $1.5 million most expensive stadium. $100,000 money coming in 1966 to refurbish, again in part to try to keep them in Pawtucket rather than moving. Again, another about $14.9 million in upgrades in 1999. Most of that taxpayer financed as well. Again, both of those big pieces in 66 and 99, again in response to owners and the team talking about moving out of the region. I guess I really should have kept under wraps that I'm from Holy Cross here at Worcester, because Worcester's been the bad guy in lots of these moves, trying to steal the team. I have not got them yet, but they've certainly been in the mix a bunch. Again, as of 2006, the average new AAA stadium built over that time period from 92 to 2006 was about $33 million. So what you're talking about in Providence is a stadium. The numbers there have ranged from about 70 to 85 million, kind of depending on how much you're talking about the stadium and what that includes, including parking lots and things like this. So that's roughly twice what the typical stadium has cost. So we're talking about an expensive stadium, at least under current plans. So what about the Providence Stadium finances? So the big piece of the original offer by the new owners, $4 million a year for 30 years. By $4 million a year for 30 years, usually when you talk about rental rates, it's you pay $4 million a year for use of public land or something like this. This is the reverse. That's $4 million a year that the state and city will pay to the team for the privilege of having that team sell tickets in Providence. So that's $4 million coming out of taxpayer money directly into owners' pockets. That's structured as an unusual deal. I don't quite know the accounting why that's the case, but it's structured as an odd deal where the team will rent the facility from the state for $1 million, but then will receive $5 million in reverse rent. There's a property tax exemption. If you're talking about an $85 million stadium at the commercial property tax rate in Providence, that normally would be about a $4.2 million property tax bill. The owners want an exemption for that as well. If we look at these in terms of net present value over a 30-year time frame, you're talking about $69 million from that rental payment, plus about $70 million in property tax exemption. Land giveaway, so the proposed place for the stadium is currently open space land owned by the state. The owners have offered to pay for that land at $1 a year, and of course some infrastructure improvements around the area as well. From a purely economic standpoint, I'm not going to argue at all about making sure that folks can get in and out of their businesses. That's what good government does, is make sure people can operate businesses that work for their customers and work for the business. So there may be a large infrastructure payment in there. I don't think I would take any concerns with that. These are all issues related that we have some sort of questions. So we have got about $142 million worth of subsidy here in net present value, plus land, plus infrastructure. And again, that's somewhere in the vicinity of about 80% of construction costs, depending on how you look at all the numbers. So again, in the ballpark of what some other teams have received over the past 20 years. So there we go. So economic impact studies, and I'm definitely put that in quote. I'm a major critic of economic impact studies in general, often commissioned by groups with a vested interest in the outcome of the study, and they're used to justify public subsidies. Any economic impact statement, if I could basically say any single piece to take home from this study, or from this talk, is any economic impact study published by the people who are trying to justify public subsidies, you should always take with a grain of salt, and many grains of salt. Now that does not mean, so the governor has now, or the legislature has hired an independent economist to come look at that. That's Andy Zimbalist. Full disclosure, I'm a good friend of Andy Zimbalist. That being said, that's probably one you can generally trust. I may be critical of him as well. We'll see what happens. I don't know what he's going to say in the end. But that being said, at least Andy's going to get paid for that study whether he comes up with a big positive number or a big negative number. And that's kind of what's important. Again, I can be biased here as well. But here's the difference about what I'm telling you as opposed to what the Red Sox or Paw Sox are telling you is after today, I'm going to go home to Worcester and College of the Holy Cross, and they will pay me whether I tell you a big positive number here or a big negative number here. That doesn't mean that I can't also be biased myself, but I at least don't have a built-in bias as part of that. They typically measure gross economic impact rather than net impact, so you're measuring the total amount of activity that does occur. You're not very good at measuring economic activity that doesn't occur because of this. They generally ignore a handful of important issues related to substitution effects, leakages, and crowding out. So let me tell you what those are. Substitution effect is when money is spent in the local economy on baseball that then doesn't get spent elsewhere. Okay? So for example, if we look at the Pawtucket Sox, the Paw Sox probably generate somewhere in the vicinity of about $12 million a year in revenue. Okay? Most of that is locals who are here spending money at the ballpark. Okay? And that is economic activity that's occurring in Rhode Island because of the Paw Sox. However, it would be a mistake to say the Paw Sox are generating $12 million in economic impact, because the families who are going to the game are people who are not then spending that night doing something else. Most of the time, economic impact studies, when they assume an economic impact, they're assuming if that event or that team or that place was not there, that the people who are there would instead be in their home, huddled in their closet, with the lights out, not fasting, right? So spending no other money. If you think instead of people having a certain entertainment budget, and I can spend it here or here, yeah, spending $12 million on the Paw Sox is economic activity, but mind you, that's $12 million that isn't spent down at Federal Hill, right, at the restaurants, in the movie theaters, and other events around the area. So that's the substitution effect. For minor league baseball, that's huge. The vast majority of people in minor league baseball are local residents spending local money at a local activity. That money, if it wasn't spent in baseball, would be spent somewhere else in the local economy, and therefore there's lots of this substitution effect. Second one there is what's called crowding out. Not as big a deal with minor league baseball, but crowding out is when lots of people being in an area keep other activity out because it's too crowded. So Yogi Berra actually said this. He said, you know, no one goes there anymore, it's too crowded. Okay, that's obviously a little goofy, but anyone, of course, in Massachusetts who's ever tried to go into Boston on the Pike on a Friday night when it's Yankees Red Sox knows don't even bother. Okay? Or Marathon Day, right? Again, no one in their right mind goes into Boston on Marathon Day, again, because there's many other people go there. So the marathon generates economic activity, but it also keeps other economic activity from happening. And then leakages, so that's, again, not such a big deal, but I want to generalize in all sorts of things. Leakages are when money gets spent in a city but doesn't stay in the city. At least some part of this here is if you've got out-of-state owners who are taking profits here, they're probably not likely to be pouring that profit back into the Rhode Island economy, but are pulling that out and spending that in Massachusetts. They often exaggerate opportunities for outside events. We'll talk about that for sure here. And here's the rule of thumb. So, independent economist. So I'm going to call myself an independent economist. We look back when new stadiums are built, when they're refurbished, when we have relocated franchises, when we have work stoppages, when baseball or basketball or hockey disappears for a while, or we look at mega events that come in and out. Obviously, I've been talking to lots of folks about the Olympics here, potentially in Boston. So what we do is we take a look at these things, we see when there's a change in the environment, and we try to measure anything we can. We look at income, GDP, employment, taxable sales, tourist arrivals, anything like this, hotel occupancy, and see if we get a big spike in economic activity. In general, there's remarkable agreement among economists. So again, guys like me, guys like Andy Zimbalist, who's been hired by the legislature to take a look at this particular deal here, people all over the U.S., remarkable agreement that we cannot find big bumps associated with sports and big benefits from host cities. Again, study after study, event after event, league after league. This is about as close as you get to economists actually agreeing. Okay? As a matter of fact, we have they're expensive methods to generate local economic development, and we have our rule of thumb. Take whatever the promoters or leagues tell you, move the decimal point one place, and that's a pretty good estimate. And that's a pretty good estimate. So, let's talk about some of the things that you can actually think about. Why might you want stadiums to be built? And one is this anchor for local economic development. So here's the sales job. Wrigley Field's a perfect sales job. For a whole variety of reasons, I have this particular picture up. In any case, there's Wrigley Field, old stadium. Again, one of the few older than McCoy. What we have here is we have a stadium that's right there, part of the local neighborhoods. Yeah, can we get some lights down? Maybe people can see a little better there. So that's maybe a little better here. We have the stadium here, all these little blue things here. There's restaurants, there's bars, there's clubs all around here. That's the Cubby Bear, Murphy's Bleachers, Campeche. I've done a lot of research. It was purely for academic reasons, trust me. So, in any case, what you have is you have tons of people pour into this area, and then after the game's out, they pour back into the local neighborhoods, and this makes this a really thriving and vibrant area. I actually do know a lot about that. I used to live right there. This is my house. So, really great neighborhood. That's what people say. If you build the stadium, they will come. You're going to have these beautiful facilities around, and that's what you're going to end up with, right? There we go. Okay, so that's the dream. Wrigley Field, Fenway's a lot like this too. So if you take a look at Fenway, a lot like this as well. This tends to be the reality. That's about 15 miles south of Wrigley Field. That's U.S. Cellular. That's where the White Sox play. Notice all of the economic development that's gone on around this area since that new facility was built in 1992. There's that place. It's a taco place. It's really very good. But that's what you get. So basically, what you have here is you have this kind of walled fortress, right? With a moat of parking lots, and it keeps all the economic activity driven into the stadium rather than into the neighborhood. And of course, if you're the White Sox, that's actually what you want, right? If I'm the White Sox owner, I am not in the neighborhood redevelopment business. I'm in the revenue generation business. I do not want people spending their time before the game going to Murphy's Bleachers, having a bunch of beer, going to the game for a little while, and then leaving afterwards and going to Hare, which is a Caribbean restaurant right there. That's not what I want. Okay? I want people to buy that stuff inside, and as a matter of fact, if you look at here, the stadium footprint is way bigger for the White Sox than it is for Wrigley, even though the stadiums both hold the same number of people. All of that extra space is restaurants, food, concessions, designed to generate economic activity for the White Sox. And as a matter of fact, the White Sox actually generate about 50% more in ancillary, that is concessions and other revenue, than the Cubs do. So this is actually a much better stadium for the owners than this is, even though that's what's always pushed. Here, let's redevelop our area. Let's use this as an anchor as part of a major downtown redevelopment. Now, mind you, I could have just chosen two at random to make my point, but this happens a lot. Is that what I wanted? Yeah, this is fine. So here's McCoy, right? So we're right over here, right? And so here's McCoy. Mind you, this is a place that's had 70 years to develop a thriving entertainment district around it. And we have a little bit, right? So we have a couple little restaurants in here, Chinese, but I don't think anyone would call this, despite the fact that this has been a huge entertainment draw for now 75 years. If you just look at the last 10 years, 6 million people have gone here. And this is the economic development in the area around that you get. Okay? And again, this is not something that you say, well, we haven't had the time for this to all get going yet. No, this is something we've had 75 years to develop this, and this is hardly a thriving entertainment district. Here's a couple of the other new stadiums in the area. This is probably the I don't have Charlotte in here yet, but this is Lehigh Iron Pigs, new stadium about 4 years ago. Beautiful stadium. But again, this is not a stadium designed to build economic development around this. There's literally nothing around this area except for parking lots, lots of concessions inside, right? So again, this is not something that is generating urban development in the region. It is an excellent way to generate revenue for this team, and this has been a wildly successful ballpark for the Iron Pigs. They have led 2 years ago. They led the leagues in attendance. So great stadium, but it's designed to do one thing: sell stuff here. It's not designed to sell stuff at a bar here, or a restaurant here, or a theater here. That's not what it's trying to do, and that's actually not what it wants to do. Here's an even worse situation. This is Gwinnett. This is the Gwinnett Braves. This is in northeastern Atlanta. This is, again, one of the other teams in the International League here. Coolray Field here. Again, huge moat of parking lots around this facility here. Nothing in the area anywhere else has no effect on economic development. Closest thing to the stadium you couldn't even walk to without this four-lane highway here. There's a Publix supermarket. That's not exactly, let's go down, watch a baseball game, and then get some groceries. Probably not what you're looking for. So that's more the reality. So let's talk about something the stadium does for the team. New AAA stadiums, so this is again based on data from 1992 through 2006, do raise attendance by about 2,200 in year one. But by year 10, that attendance bump is down to 250 a game. So I think you can make a pretty strong case. You build a stadium in downtown Providence, you're going to get a big surge in attendance without question. There's a huge novelty effect with this, and they're going to do stadiums right. People, the new stadium designers do a very nice job at this. However, that nostalgia effect for this beautiful new stadium down by the river doesn't seem to last very long. By year 10, the average attendance bump for AAA teams is down to about 250 a game. So basically, you get about 1,900,000, 880,000 total bump in attendance over 10 years. But let's think about what the cost of that is, right? So we're talking about spending maybe $88-ish million to get 880,000 total fans. That's basically paying $100 for every additional fan you're getting in through the turnstiles over 10 years. After 10 years, we don't see any long-term effect on attendance. Ticket prices do rise by about $1.60. You might not think that's a lot of $1.60, but mind you, you're talking about for Red Sox in Fenway tickets $1.60, right? That'll buy you about 3 pitches of the game, right? But in minor league baseball, that's significant. In minor league baseball, where the average ticket price for an adult is about $8, $1.60 is about a 20% increase in prices. What this means is, of course, one of the things that you'll argue is, we want to keep the Paw Sox here, either here in Pawtucket or at least in Rhode Island, because we want to have this great affordable family entertainment option. You build a new stadium, you're going to have an entertainment option that's less affordable than the past. And again, historically we're seeing about a 20% increase in ticket prices in the first year that a new stadium's out there. Total revenues do increase by at least $2.7 million a year. I bring that up because, why does the owner want to move out of Pawtucket? It's not because he hates Pawtucket. It's not because he got splinters once sitting on a seat at an old bench in Pawtucket. It's none of these things. Why does the owner want to move to a new stadium? It's this: more revenue. Okay? That's a totally reasonable and honorable thing for the owners to want to do. Maximize their revenue. But if they want to maximize their revenue, they should be paying for that extra revenue, not someone else, right? I wasn't trying to get an applause line there. I was trying to be somewhat neutral on this, but and of course, why ask for subsidies? Because the new stadium is going to end up costing the owner somewhere, to finance a $70 to $85 million stadium, is going to end up costing the owner $6 or $7 million a year. So it makes no sense for the owners to build their own stadium, because the amount of additional revenue they're likely to generate from a new stadium is not sufficient to cover the amount of cost to build a stadium if they build their own. And so therefore, they ask someone else to build a stadium for them. Stadium comparisons. So Andy, again, a friend of mine, also an important player here because he's going to be providing independent evidence to the legislature. He was actually just down at the legislature just the other day. He said the original proposal by the owners was aggressive, but not outlandish. I will agree with Andy on the aggressive part. I will also agree with Andy that it's not outlandish, only if you compare it to other baseball deals. Not if you compare this to anything in the real world. This is basically like saying, look, most other cities are jumping off a 200-foot cliff. Okay? We are certainly not going to do that. We are only going to jump off a 150-foot cliff, because that would be aggressive, the 200. It doesn't change the fact that jumping off a 150-foot cliff is also foolish. Let's take a look at these. Minor league teams versus movie theaters. Paw Sox, 2014 attendance, 540,000 people. The average 16, so Regal Cinema is the largest nationwide chain of movie theaters. The average 16-screen Regal Megaplex in 2014 generated 478,000 visitors. About the same. And roughly the spending is roughly the same as well. The Paw Sox generate about $20 per attendee, roughly, and you're talking about $14, $15 per attendee at Regal Megaplex by their figures. But no one is talking about building movie theaters for folks. Right? If you said, hey, I'm going to come build a movie theater, so it'd be what I really need from you guys. I'm going to need you to build the movie theater for me, and actually, I'm going to need you to I'll build the movie theater, but then I'll lease it back to you for $1 million, and then you release it from me for $5 million. So pay me $4 million a year to open up a movie theater. I will take all the money, and by the way, I don't want to pay property taxes either. I hope that's okay. And I notice the best piece of land for me is a piece of public land that's supposed to be a park, but I would like to take that instead. And of course, I will I will lease that from you for $1. So our movie theaters, again, exempt from sales tax, property tax, market value leases, all these things. We would say that's crazy, but somehow we lose our heads when we're talking about AAA baseball. Stadium comparisons, minor league teams versus factories. This was in Go Local Providence yesterday. So the Pod Sox, I think the numbers were wrong in the thing. My estimates are more like 30 full-time employees plus 70 full-time equivalent game day workers. So the Pod Sox are probably about 100 full-time year-round jobs. I may be off in that, but I'm certainly not off by more than about a factor of 2, so I'm not too far off here. So you're talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars, $100 million maybe for 100 jobs a year. That's about an $8 million annual subsidy, or about $80,000 per job. South Carolina just inked a deal with Volvo to provide about $120 million, about $7 million in annual subsidy to build a factory that's going to have 2,000 full-time employees. Now, I'm not even saying that this, I mean, obviously Volvo kind of extorted some money out of South Carolina here as well, but look, they're getting $7 million a year to generate 2,000 full-time employees, or about $3,500 a job. I'm going to be hard-pressed to say that that's not a good deal for the folks in South Carolina. That seems to be a lot of money to spend for jobs, at least, especially considering the type of jobs that a minor league team typically generates. One other stadium comparison, and I wish I put this slide, I just didn't have, just didn't quite get it. If we compare the Pod Sox deal again to Charlotte, I think that's a nice comparison there, where the original bid from the owners is again about $4 million a year plus property tax exemption plus this free lease. The Charlotte Stadium, the new Charlotte, again, opened up last season for the first time. That involves $16 million total subsidy on about a $50 million stadium. I'm not, again, sure that I would be in favor of the $16 million, but $16 million, certainly from a taxpayer perspective, looks a whole lot better than the sort of $70 to $140 million that we're throwing around here. So, why does the owner think we can get away with this, asking for these huge amounts? Of course, because there's this threat of relocation. But there's a real question, where would the Pod Sox go? The biggest thing affecting whether a market is a good location for baseball or other things is how big is your metropolitan area, and this is the greater metropolitan area, obviously, Providence, versus what other sort of things are out there, and are there other sports franchises in the city. So if you look at the 28th through 40th largest cities in the United States in terms of population by metropolitan area, we've got Cincinnati, Kansas City, Cleveland, bunch of teams here, lots of which have Major League Baseball already, and other Division I, top division franchises. So Columbus here has both the Blue Jackets and the Columbus Crew in Major League Soccer. Indianapolis here has AAA baseball plus the Colts and the Pacers. San Jose has Major League Soccer plus the 49ers are now in San Jose, and they have the Sharks. So you go down here, if you're looking at large cities, Las Vegas is without any other Major League franchises, but has a AAA franchise. Austin has a AAA franchise, but no other Major League franchises. Norfolk, Virginia, actually that's Virginia Beach, is where the team is. Again, a AAA franchise and no other things. Providence is the 4th largest city in the United States without any Major League franchises. And you really think that not having a AAA team is not going to be an attractive place. If you look at us compared to the folks just below us, I mean, Providence is bigger than Milwaukee. Providence is bigger than Milwaukee, and Milwaukee not only has baseball, but they also have the Bucks as well. Providence is bigger than Jacksonville, Memphis, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Raleigh, Salt Lake City, all of which have one or more other Major League franchises. Every one of those cities down below us has at least AA, if not AAA baseball. So Providence without a AAA team would be an obvious hole, would be such a remarkable anomaly. It's hard to believe that hole would not be filled. Where would the Pod Sox go? So where are possible places? Pawtucket obviously is a nice place, and of course Providence is similar. We have a stadium in place, obviously, here. Worcester, we've talked about Worcester going in that. Worcester is same distance to a Major League Baseball stadium as Pawtucket is. It's only 38 miles away from Pawtucket, which would make it difficult for Pawtucket to get another AAA team, but not more difficult to get another AA team. The biggest stadium acceptable for baseball right now is actually at Holy Cross. There's a minor league team there now. That holds 3,000. No AAA team is moving there. Of course, maybe Worcester could build a new stadium. There's New Bedford. They were in the papers here a couple days ago talking about wanting to put that in there. They are nice because they're a little bit farther from Major League Baseball than them. It'd be, again, a problem for Pawtucket to get another AAA team, but they have no stadium at all. Springfield, Springfield, Mass. They have been without a minor league baseball team for almost 50 years now, and has not played since their whole stadium actually burned down. Large stadium, fairly far from Major League Baseball in Pawtucket, but they have no stadium at all. No stadium there at all. New Haven, you can play at Yale. Fairly large metropolitan area, but still half the size of Pawtucket, of the Providence metropolitan area. Stadium about half the size there at Yale. They have played minor league baseball there. Pittsfield I throw in there, at least in part because that's where the Paw Sox came from originally. So Pittsfield is in there, and they still have the old stadium that they played in there, 4,500. But you know, if they're not talking about building any of these new stadiums, I guess you could go to Montreal or Ottawa. Mind you, Montreal, the last season of Major League Baseball in Montreal drew worse than the Paw Sox. So it's not entirely clear that that's where you want, and it's not entirely clear that a 45,000 seat stadium is exactly what you want to put 4,000 minor league fans in. I actually did have the opportunity to go to Montreal during the last season. It was really cool. I got to go to a game. It was Souvenir Ball Night. They didn't plan it that way, but pretty much everyone there got one at some point during the game. There's Ottawa. Ottawa I bring up also that one of the International League teams moved from Ottawa to, is it the Iron Pigs? So Ottawa's there. Mind you, they moved out of Ottawa because they couldn't generate attendance there, so it's not entirely clear why you want to go back to a place where baseball's already failed, although they do have a stadium in place at least that they can do that. So, I mean, it's not obvious that there's obvious places for them to go. Worcester is always the one that's thrown around as the biggest one, but Tim Murray, so former lieutenant governor here, quote, "If the deal were to fall apart, I think people here would be willing to listen. But everyone recognizes this requires significant municipal assistance. Massachusetts traditionally has been reluctant to use tax dollars for those kinds of things, and I think that in most cases, appropriately so." So basically, the head of the business community in Worcester is saying, we're not building you a stadium. Okay? Maybe, we'll talk, we'll take you, right? But we're not building you a stadium. If you want to build a stadium, you're welcome to, and we would be happy to talk to you about non-monetary benefits, and these are real. Name recognition and advertising for the city and state. If you look at Google News hits for Pawtucket over the past year, in Google identified news sources, 55,000 hits for Pawtucket. 33,600 of those are for the Pawtucket Sox. So about 60% of the news hits that Pawtucket has gotten over the past year has been news associated with the Sox. Mind you, a ton of that is actually stadium related. It's not just the sports team related. But you know, that does get your name out there. The question is, what does that generate in terms of money? Civic pride, I'm not going to deny that at all. It's a public amenity. Family entertainment, but mind you, a new stadium makes that less accessible in a new stadium. And of course, non-monetary benefits, there can be alternative uses. But let's talk about baseball stadiums. Baseball stadiums are extremely well designed to watch baseball. They're extremely poorly designed for just about any other usage. First of all, they're outside. So when you're talking about, well, let's do a concert in February, in Providence, I think the dunk might have an advantage over any of these new things. However, it's beautiful to go watch things outside in the summer, but again, not great concert venues and not good venues for other sporting events. So if we look at McCoy Stadium is not just used for baseball. But my guess is that 90% of all usage of that stadium is purely Paw Sox related, and I might go as far as 95, but I don't want to speak beyond my knowledge. I know they do one concert every year. Great concert. Dylan was here a couple years ago, if I remember right. So, what's that?
It was good.
And it was awesome. It sure was. So great, but also, you know, one extra day a year is not what pays for your stadium, right? And even a handful of extra days, difficult. So, conclusions and policy implications. Professional leagues are extremely effective at exerting their monopoly power, pitting city against city. That's exactly what we've got here, neighborhood against neighborhood. You know, cities can and should take steps to prevent you know, sports from playing the cities rather than the other way around. Let me do a final comparison here. Boston Marathon versus professional sports. Boston Marathon is the world's oldest and most prestigious and fastest marathon in the world. It attracts as many live spectators each year as the Patriots, the Bruins, or the Celtics. Okay, so as many live spectators. Mind you, these aren't paying spectators because you watch for free, so that's got to be a caveat. But huge attendance associated with that. And it's also among the most non-local races, so you bring tons of people from around the world spending money. Right? That's actually me running the Boston Marathon about 5 years ago. Obviously, it's early in the race because I'm still smiling. Boston Marathon receives no public subsidy. No public subsidy. Honolulu Marathon generates as many new net arrivals as the Pro Bowl, receives no subsidy, while the Pro Bowl receives a cash payment from Honolulu in excess of $5 million from the Hawaii Tourism Authority. So the question is why? And it all comes down to market power. No one has a monopoly on the distance 26.2 miles. So you can always put up you can always do another marathon if one marathon gets too uppity, all right? But we have a much harder time protecting ourselves against baseball leagues that specifically limit the number of teams out there, because that really does give them all this ability to pit cities against cities in a way you don't see in so many other businesses. So that's it for my remarks. I'm happy to take questions, which I may or may not be able to answer, but I will do my best, and we can go from there. So why don't we get some lights on?
McCoy is only 5 minutes from here, so we've got time for plenty of questions. So, Professor, go ahead.
Yeah, let's go here.
Professor, would you speak at the podium, please?
Oh, yeah, okay, yes, thank you. Yep.
Do you think Rhode Island is making a mistake also then by subsidizing McCoy Stadium, because we're still taking money out of the state capital budget every year to repair McCoy, et cetera?
Yeah, so yeah, I would say that's probably the case, right? Mind you, you've got some sunk cost here that it might be worth small payment to make sure that you have a usable stadium using something. That being said, that's a whole different, spend a few dollars keeping something you have up, upkeep, rather than throwing out another $80 million to build something new.
Like to do a big renovation at McCoy to keep them there?
Big renovation would be exactly the same deal as a Providence Stadium, right? You're talking about the same sort of dollars, and dollars which, again, I would highly encourage the new owners to do anything they want to McCoy Stadium. Give them carte blanche to spend any money they want to improve that facility so it meets their needs, and do everything you can to make it easy for them to do that. But I shouldn't expect someone else's credit card to renovate my house. Let's go here on the end first.
So can you talk to us about any communities that have rejected these kinds of deals and what happens?
So there's plenty of, there are certainly communities that have rejected these sort of deals, and a great example of one is Boston, is Foxborough. And the folks in Massachusetts rejected a deal to put in a bunch of public financing into Gillette Stadium. And they said, okay, well, we'll move. And they said, well, we'll move to Providence. And Providence didn't want to spend a bunch of money on that, and they said, okay, well, we're definitely moving to Hartford. And Hartford said, well, we're not willing to put a ton of money into this either. And then eventually the Kraft said, you know, Boston's a really good location for football. We should just do this ourselves if we're going to do this. Just like Providence is a good place for at least AA or AAA baseball. And this is going to be a great slot for that. Let's go right next to it here.
Actually, the difference, if you go by Larry's numbers and Skeffington's numbers, 85 million to build a new stadium with the infrastructure costs not fully realized, not fully estimated, or 65 to renovate McCoy. That's $20 million they could spend on the, you know, the surrounding area if they want to.
Yeah, so I can't comment on how much it would take to bring McCoy up. I'm not at all familiar with those sorts of numbers, but it can be very expensive, obviously, to renovate facilities. You know, we spent $19 million just about 2 decades ago, so it can be very expensive. I don't want to just be back in this front row.
I want to ask, do you have any record? We read in the paper that attendance to baseball games is declining along the time. Do you have any records, any numbers about that?
Yeah, so
My second question, if you don't mind, my second question is, do you have any example of a stadium that was built like that and later on abandoned? You know, seeing forward, the Hemeth abandoned on our waterfront.
yeah, so I can answer that quickly. So generally, baseball attendances at minor leagues have been roughly stable, not any tremendous growth. We definitely see, though, a novelty effect when you build new stadiums. So I would be quite confident to say that a new stadium built in Providence would fill a 10,000-seat stadium for several years without that being under serious question. However, that's likely to tail off within a decade. That's what the data shows on other places. We see lots of abandoned stadiums. Montreal, for example, one we talked about, there's an abandoned stadium. Ottawa is another one. So we definitely see that. You don't want to be left with one. You very well could be a McCoy Stadium that's an abandoned stadium as well. Let's go here.
What is the political component in all this equation? Because as you see, or you're talking about the public money, the taxpayer money, is the target right now. It's not the export, it's not the pride of the people in Providence or Kentucky. It's the taxpayer money, that is the target in all these equations you showed. What is the political component? Because you don't show nothing, for example, how statistically the authorities or the governors or the commissions in the states or legislators take care of these matters.
So I don't want to delve too deeply into Rhode Island politics. Yeah, how's that for a dodge, right? If you look at the history of McCoy Stadium and some of the financing associated with that, that's been a little sketchy in the past. That being said, certainly one thing for sure driving the fact that politicians have been much more skeptical in Rhode Island than we've seen about these deals in many, many other places. And everyone from the governor to everyone in the legislature, the Providence mayor, very, very skeptical, again, in comparison to lots of other cities. And I think that is directly related to having been burned on the software deal with Schilling. I mean, that was such a bad, obvious thing. Now, these are totally different baseball, relations, but it just gets tangled up in there. So I think, a lot of people burned me once, and that happens. But fool me twice on this, and shame on me. And so I think you are seeing a much more careful examination of this. And again, bringing in Andy, who really is an independent guy in many ways, is helpful. Let's go here next.
What about the threat of moving the Four Sox to Foxborough, Patriots Stadium area?
Sure, okay. No reason not to. So that's not even one that crossed my mind as one. But again, there's no obvious facility there for them to play in. And you certainly don't want them to play it in Gillette itself, because that's drawing 6,000 people to a 65,000 seat stadium. That doesn't work for the MLS team. It's certainly not going to work for minor league baseball. So it could happen, but there's no reason to think that that's a lot better place for baseball than a currently existing facility in the smack dab in the middle of a huge metropolitan area. So.
We hear you saying that you think these subsidies for sports stadiums are greatly overvalued in many places. Where do you think the dividing line is where a deal for Rhode Island and the Paw Sox makes sense versus does not make sense?
Yeah, that's a hard thing. So obviously, you know, there's not one tipping point where you say, obviously, $15 million in subsidy is awesome, but $16 million is terrible, right? So this is just a very, very clear, you know, slope here. At $85 million, I am quite confident that this is a very poor deal for taxpayers. At $1 million, I'm not going to squawk too much. I'm still not sure that you'd give $1 million to a new movie theater or a new restaurant, but I'm not going to squawk too much about this. So, you know, what battle or war am I trying to win? I'm probably not going to. I mean, this team, no matter what happens, is going to get a property tax exemption from the stadium. Almost certainly going to be the case. We see that. We see very, very few stadiums anywhere in the United States that pay property taxes on their facility. That's not one I'm going to win. But if I could win the let's at least not hand them a bunch of money as well as a giant property tax exemption, I guess, you know, I would take that. Let's go here first.
A couple of things. I really love the kind of stark comparison with movie theaters, and I think you'd agree that a movie theater is better at generating economic activity in those kind of secondary hotels, bars, restaurants. You know, it's doing more for those kind of outlying businesses. But I mean, as far as a public investment goes, if we're attempting to draw economic activity to a particular area, wouldn't it make more sense to spend that $85 million in improving the infrastructure around that area and make it more viable for the businesses that we want to attract as a state and as a community?
Yeah, and to be quite honest, if you were trying to promote economic development in one particular place, putting $85 million into a stadium is not necessarily a bad thing if you are trying to generate economic activity in that one place that you're pouring the $85 million. I have no doubt that putting a new stadium in downtown Providence would have probably some revitalization and some economic activity effects on that area. It's hard to believe that it wouldn't. The question is whether benefiting one place with that $85 million is worth the fact that you're taking $85 million out of the pockets of everyone else. And on top of that, it's not at all clear that spending $85 million in that way is the best way to revitalize.
Right,
I think it tends to be the easiest way. The things that politicians and urban planners can point at, it's much easier to say, oh, I'm going to build a stadium, rather than, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to improve the curbs a little bit and the sewer system. No one wants to be known, you know, there's not a McCoy sewer system, right? Right. Even though that's probably a lot more important to the development of Pawtucket than a stadium.
Right, and that would,
it was built on a swamp, that is true. Yes.
And I mean, those kind of small improvements of roads, bridges, you know, traffic patterns would do more to
probably
impact that area.
And way harder to put on a 30-second campaign ad, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, do you have either a written summary of the statistics you're using here, or are there articles you could, you know, that you could head us towards, so we can hand that to
yeah,
our
I tend to be an expert on economic development in general related to sports events and stadiums. So if you just Google me on Google Scholar, there's a bunch of stuff that will be publicly available, and not all of it is crazy technical regressions and all this sort of stuff. Right. The person who's the expert on minor league baseball is a guy named Seth Gitter. That's Gitter. And a bunch of his stuff is likely to be available as well. He's got some very nice, all that 1992 to 2006, I pulled a lot from him related to that, so he's got a bunch of things there. There's also a woman named Nola Aga, who is a little bit more positive about the economic impact of minor league baseball than I am, and that's A-G-H-A, Nola, N-O-L-A. A-G-H-A, and she'll have some stuff that's publicly available as well. And again, most of that stuff you should be able to find in a working paper form, but all that has also then been peer reviewed and published in respected journals after that as well. Let's go all the way in the back there.
Professor, you talked about in your presentation about the dollars that the owners are looking for and how they want to try to maximize revenues. And I was wondering if you've done anything related to the specific site itself in terms of how it would impact other publicly subsidized areas like Dunkin' Donuts Center, the Alice Nani skating rink, or the convention center. The reason I asked is that the owners have mentioned that they want to try as much as possible to make that into a year-round venue, and I think that if you've got all this other activity that's publicly subsidized, it's going to take away from a lot of those other destinations, and it just doesn't really make any economic sense to focus it all on one new stadium versus all the
Yeah,
other.
so I think your point is well taken, and I would say that, again, particularly with outdoor baseball stadiums, the opportunity to use them in for other events is fairly limited, and on top of that, again, if you specifically design an event for your stadium and you're bringing in something that wouldn't have come otherwise, then that's new economic activity. Dylan was probably not coming to Providence except for the fact that this was well designed, or Pawtucket, because it was well designed for this particular venue. But, a general concert series, Providence is going to be on that destination list, and if you put it in the baseball stadium, that's one more concert for the baseball stadium, but one less for the Ducks. So that's exactly right. So let's go to your neighbor who's right next to you.
I just have, I work at the local and only hotel here in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments. We, occupancy-wise, and I don't have any numbers because we don't survey, I guess, to say, occasionally we'll ask at the desk, but I would say occupancy-wise, we probably do better occupancy with a water fire in downtown Providence than a game at McCoy Stadium. I just, in general.
I did not know that, but that does
games.
not surprise me. So please go on.
Because a lot of people go to the games, all mostly local, but we do get a lot of people, I think, and we're seeing maybe a little bit more people this year because of all the publicity, people coming and staying in the hotel to go to the game because we're in walking distance. The other comment I wanted to make is, the owners have talked about the infrastructure, and they just say it's all industrial. And I don't want to make any offense to my friend over here, my clients, but it's not all, well, you didn't say it, the owners did. It's not all industrial in that neighborhood. I lived in that neighborhood. And what they seem to neglect is there's a thriving community theater, one of the oldest community theaters in New England, right across the street from McCoy Stadium, that sometimes have recurring events at the same time, which does cause a little traffic congestion with live theater. So I don't understand why they're saying there's no infrastructure. There is theater, there are other few restaurants. There's other restaurants a little bit further away, but still within walking distance. So I don't understand the owners, what they're looking, what are they just really looking for a way out of Pawtucket is my question.
Probably looking shiny new, right? That's one
it
thing.
just doesn't make sense to
So
me.
let me just take 3 more here so we can all get going here. Let's do 1 and then 2 and then 3, okay? So 1 here.
Professor, you pretty much dismissed in a blanket way multi-uses for these minor league ballparks.
Yep.
Yet the owners of this one are trying to emphasize how they will do football and lacrosse as well as perhaps concert. Have you ever seen a minor league stadium that could be configured to do the other sports as well as baseball?
Yeah, so, they all can, right? But they're all just not well designed to do that. When you think about, so for example, right now, as we speak, Yankee Stadium is being used for the new Major League Soccer team in New York City. So these can be used, but they're terrible facilities for that because baseball, you want everyone around that, around home plate, and so you have all your stands in the corner of the field, and you have, you have pitching mounds and you have dirt in the middle of your field. So it certainly can be done. It's just not a very great way to do things, and so these tend to be pretty subpar facilities. And the teams that are in there are in baseball stadiums, so rectangular teams that are in baseball stadiums are always looking to get out. And baseball teams that are in rectangular stadiums are always looking to get out. Which is why we have now 1 remaining major league facility in the United States that shares baseball and football, where 2 decades ago we had 15. So here and then 1 more. Yeah.
Have any of the new stadiums which have been built rely on public transit? Because the owners are saying, parking lots would be minimized in this, and what they really need is the train and walking distance.
Yeah, so if you're doing a stadium as part of a grander public transportation network, I'm certainly not going to argue against that. Obviously, think about Fenway. Fenway has very, very little parking around it, and of course they're able to do that because they've got very good public transportation networks that allow you to get there.
But I'm asking the other way. So if any new stadium's been built with the model is public transit, not parking lots?
Yes,
Okay.
and those are the ones that tend to be much, much better at generating local economic development. So places where the public transportation can be utilized, where you don't end up with this moat of parking lots around that, those are the ones that are going to work. So that does give, if Providence goes through, I would urge any urban planners to say, how can you get the parking in there without it interfering with the ability for people to leave the stadium and pour into local neighborhoods? Because basically a parking lot between the stadium and the neighborhood you want to get to is death for getting people to go into that neighborhood. And so we've got lots of great examples. Lodo, Coors Field in Lodo downtown in Denver is fantastic. Petco Stadium in San Diego, good facility that again flows right out into the Gaslamp district. So there are some success stories there. You still tend to see many more of these. Let's build these things out in the middle of nowhere, surround them by all of our own revenue streams, and kick people in. And last one here.
I was wondering if you had ever seen Mr. Zimbalist's presentation, because he's the one he's speaking to our state leadership and our elected officials. And if I thought that his presentation covered what you covered, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about this whole thing. Does he come to the same conclusions? Has he got the same aerial photographs?
So, I don't know what Andy's going to say on this. I have not talked to him about this, except only in passing, while making fun of him about something else probably. We tend to be on the same page that we think this is a poor use of public funding. He very well could be emphasizing the things like using this as a catalyst to develop downtown and say, that may be something that's worth it. So, Andy is an honest economist, definitely independent. He does have some ties with the Red Sox owners. He certainly knows Mr. Skeffington. But that being said, he's going to be able to provide some things. My guess is he's going to be slightly more favorable to the project than I am, but he is not also going to be wildly enthusiastic without any data to back that